Hi, this video is to help you interpret a part or non-qualified accountant test for public practice. This test is applicable for candidates applying for intermediate or senior accountant roles where membership of a professional accounting body is not a requirement. I'm Giles Pearson, I'm the co-founder of Account Tests and also the author of this test. Looking at the report, you can see at the top right hand side is the order number, and that's the order number you'll need for any time you want to look up a test in our testing portal. At the bottom of the first page you can see the time taken. This test has an allocated time of 40 minutes, so if that time taken says 40, that means your candidate was still working on the test when their time ran out. Otherwise you can see how long they spent in the test. The start and finish times tell you the date and time the candidate entered and exited the testing platform, which includes the time for them filling out their details in the biodata and doing some sample questions. If you go through to the next page, this gives you some background. It also gives you a link to our website about the proctoring. All of the tests are proctored. What that means is that as the candidate is doing the test, their camera is on and it's making sure that they're doing the test under fair exam conditions. This includes monitoring who's taking the test, the use of other devices, and if they're accessing other windows on the device that they're using. Each test report like this comes with a proctoring report, which for privacy reasons you can only access by logging in to the testing platform. So follow the link to the website to see a video there which helps you interpret the proctoring report and also make sure that you know how to find that proctoring report in the testing portal. If we go through to the next page, this is the most important. So at the top of the page you'll see the bell curve. This is where you can see how your candidate did compared to our norm group. When we developed this test, what we did was get a whole lot of appropriately qualified accountants to go through the question set to create a norm group, and then you're able to see how your candidate did compared to that norm group. How do they stack up against their peers when looking to see whether they've got the technical knowledge that you need? The top of the bell curve is the 50th percentile, so at that level half their peers have a better technical ability than the candidate and half have less. At the 75th percentile, the candidate is better than 75% of their peers or of the norm group, and so on. Because there's always some variety in the seniority of a job that you're advertising, you'll need to make a judgment as to how high a candidate's technical knowledge needs to be to justify keeping them in the hiring process. Taking on a candidate whose skills are less than you might prefer might mean you need to consider what training or mentoring the candidate might initially need. At the bottom of the page are the raw scores. This is how the candidate did when answering the 40 questions in the test. The raw score is compared to the norm group raw scores, and that's how we came up with the percentiles for the bell curve. The test is generally quite hard, so the raw scores reflect that, which is why the percentile score is the most important one for comparing the candidate against their peers. In the raw scores section, the green bar is the questions they got correct, the red bar is the ones they got wrong, and the grey bar is the questions they didn't answer. We use the raw scores for all the analysis in the rest of the report. So on the next page you can see the first level of analysis. This looks at the questions based on difficulty. So how did they do on the easier questions versus the harder questions? You'd expect to see them do better on the easier questions. If that's not the case, then you'll need to look in more detail at the topic analysis, what questions they didn't answer, and potentially at the proctoring report. After this, we analyse by topic. We go through the different topics covered by the test, and you can see where the candidate's strengths and weaknesses are. This might be useful if some of the topics are more or less important for success in the role. Also, they might highlight some specific training requirements or where you might need to initially have more oversight over the output of the candidate. The topics we cover are accounting and financial reporting, so that's looking at the reporting of financial information, but not including any specific questions around accounting standards, so no US GAAP, no IFRS. Business growth and forecasting is looking at budgeting and forecasting, so forward-looking information. Business monitoring and analysis is monitoring existing performance. And double entry accounting is looking at debits and credits and making sure the candidate has an intuitive understanding of debits and credits. On the next page, we go through question by question. So what was the question about? Which topic was it in? Did the candidate get it right or wrong? And if there is a grey circle, that means that they didn't answer the question. If you see a lot of omitted questions, that normally means the candidate's run out of time. And what that in turn means is the material was probably too hard for them. They were struggling. So typically you'll see a candidate that runs out of time. They also do relatively poorly on the test. For a candidate who's confident in the material, 40 minutes is long enough to comfortably answer all the questions. The last page gives you some hints about interpretation, which is pretty much what we're doing here, and our contact details. So if you ever have any questions on a test report you've got in front of you, or anything else you want to ask, don't hesitate to get in contact with us at help@accounttests.com. Thanks for watching this video.